Hey everyone, Dr. Andy here from Innate Balance Chiropractic and Life Coaching Center, Johannesburg, South Africa. We are nearing the end of our lockdown now. We've got, at least the hard lockdown. We've got another week, just under a week to go of hard lockdown, and then we enter a sort of downgraded phase where certain businesses can go back. I think there's still a lot of fear in the air. A lot of people concerned about, what's going to happen when they can go back to a normal life. And quite frankly, I don't think there's going to be such a thing as a normal life as we know it from before this all happened. I think things are all going to be very different. Today, in this video, I wanted to talk about using the flow. A lot of people go with the flow, and I think going with the flow is good. Nature generally goes with the flow, but nature also uses the flow. And I wanted to talk about how to do that, and how we can use the flow of things and the way things are going. Before that, though, I just wanted to talk a little bit about fear. What fear is. Why is there so much fear in the air around this pandemic? People are fearing what's going to happen economically. People are fearing what's going to happen to their way of life, lifestyles, that sort of thing. So I wanted to talk a little bit about fear and why there's so much fear around. In my opinion, I mean, there is a dictionary definition of what fear is, and it goes something like, fear is an unpleasant emotion in anticipation of harm or pain. And I think the key word there is anticipation of. It's a future-based emotion. Fear is not a very present emotion. It's based on something that's going to happen or you perceive might happen. And so, we fear things that are in the future, not happening to us right now. And so to break it down, and what I think fear is fear is really just not knowing. Fear is the unknown. And we fear the worst case scenario, and we'll always dream up the worst case scenario for ourselves and what might happen and what harm we might have to endure. And this is why I think, we fear change, because change is an unpredictable thing. We can't always tell or predict what's going to happen with the changes that are going on in the world. And that's why there's so much fear in the air, because there's all this change happening, and we don't actually know what waits for us and what's in store. And so we'll automatically default to the worst case scenario. We'll look for the danger. We'll imagine what dangers wait for us and what is in store for us. So if fear is not knowing, take for example why a child would fear the dark. They don't know what's in the dark, and so they fear it. People might fear death because they don't know what's going to happen to them after they die, or they might fear how they're going to die, or if they're going to endure pain, or if it's going to be traumatic. But it's always around the unknown. It's always something in the future, and this is why we fear change, is because it's the unknown, it's the unpredictable. And so how do we get around that? How do we get around the fear around change? And I would say that the best way to do that is to almost take an observational view, or observe change from an outside perspective, step out of the picture for a while, and become mindful of what is happening, and have a look at the changes that are going on, but be very present when doing that. When we throw ourselves into the future, we begin to try and predict what's going to happen, and invariably will default to the worst case scenario. But if we become very present, we step back a little, and we have a look, we observe at what is going on, we can then be more comfortable with the changes that are happening, and it becomes more predictable. Not that anybody can really predict the future as such, but the changes that are happening and what is going to happen becomes a little more predictable. And knowing that we are in control of what is happening right now, but not what is happening in the future, is also a lot more comforting when you become mindful and present, and look at what is happening at the moment. So the irony is we fear change because of its uncertainty, but we find predictability boring. I mean, we're a really strange bunch, aren't we? If someone is predictable, we find them boring. If life is predictable, we find that banality very boring, and most people don't like the predictability because there's no excitement. The thing is, if you structure your day and have routine, if you get routine in your day, and you know exactly how your day is going to play out, that predictability gives you a greater sense of safety, eliminates a lot of the fear that you have with the changes that are going on around you. And then your spontaneity becomes controlled spontaneity. So your life doesn't have to be boring. You can still be spontaneous, but you're in control of your spontaneity. If your life is scheduled and you know exactly what you're going to be doing, you decide when you want to be spontaneous and do something just on a whim. And that is a lot safer, and we don't fear spontaneity, we fear unpredictability. Even someone or something that is bad, if we can predict what's going to happen, is not as scary as something that we don't know what it's going to do. So to address change and to kind of sum that up, just have a look at, step outside the picture a little, become mindful. If you need tips on how to practice mindfulness, there are a lot of tips out there. I refer you to my colleague Shan. She has a YouTube channel as well. She's with Shan, and she does some talks on mindfulness and how to practice mindfulness. I will probably do some stuff on that in future, but become mindful of what is going on. Be aware of how you feel about it, why you feel that way, and what you can then do to change your feelings around what is happening in the present moment, but not what you predict might happen in the future. And that kind of brings us to using the flow. So there's all this change going on, and a lot of people are resisting this change. They want their old way of life back. They want to live things the way, live life the way it was, because that was predictable. And so they're fearing the change that's going on. And so this is where we come into using the flow. Now, a lot of people go with the flow, as I said before, and that's great. Nature goes with the flow, but nature also uses the flow. So to explain that, I'm going to use the analogy of a child with a boat, with a toy boat that has little sails on it, and you put it onto a pond, and the wind takes the little boat out into the middle of the pond. Now, if you just go with the flow, that implies an almost passive state of being, where you allow things to happen and observe them happening, but do nothing about it. It's that's what it is to me. I know to a lot of other people it means something else, but to me, going with the flow is a very passive state, and you are almost at the whim of what is happening in nature, what is happening in the world, the turn of events. You're subject to what is happening there, and you're kind of being okay with what is happening, which is great because you don't really fear stuff. You just go with it. So if the child's boat were to go into the middle of the pond and you went with the flow, you would observe that and go, oh, well, the boat's gone into the middle of the pond. You might say something like, we'll have to get you a new one, or it's lost, or that's just the way it is, but you wouldn't get too upset by it. And that would be going with the flow. Going against the flow. Now, a lot of people like to go against the flow because they're defiant and they don't like the way things are going and they want to make the changes that are going to happen in their lives. And going against the flow tends to be very energy expensive, and you might get what you want, but you might not like how you get there. And to use the analogy of the little boat, if you go against the flow, the boat floats out into the middle of the pond, you become reactive. So going against the flow is almost a reactive state where you then jump into the pond, chase after the boat, swim after it, grab it and bring it back. You've gotten what you want, you've got your boat back, but you're not very happy about how you did that. You're wet, you might be cold, you might be full of mud or pond scum or whatever you encountered in the pond, and dirty, but you got the boat back. So you got what you wanted, but you're just not very happy about it. Now, using flow, and this is what nature does. If we use the analogy of the little boat going out into the pond, using the flow is realizing that the wind has taken the boat out into the pond, standing back and observing that and going, all right, let's see what the wind does. Let's see where this boat is heading. I mean, it's in the middle of the pond now, but it's not going to stay there indefinitely. At some point, the wind will change or something will happen to edge the boat off to the side of the pond. So if I stand and observe and see what the trend is, what the wind is doing, and what the trend is, I can see where the boat is going to head. I can go and stand at that edge of the pond and I can wait for the boat to come to me. And sometimes you'll do that and the wind might change again and you'll have to change direction, go and stand somewhere else. But eventually you will get what you want and it'll come to you, as opposed to you having to spend a fortune of energy rushing after it and getting what it is you want. And the journey itself can be quite pleasant. If we relate that to nature, most animals in nature will use the change of seasons, the conditions that are around them to determine whether it's a good time to procreate, whether it's a good time to migrate, if they need to move to a different location for more food. So they use the events that are happening, they don't get upset by it. They use that and go, what do we need to do with the current events to get what it is we want, which is basically their physical necessities, food, water, and then procreation. So, most animals will wait for perfect conditions before they procreate. Warmer weather, abundance of food and water, and that's when they begin to procreate. So I hope that clarified a little the message that I wanted to carry across to you today on how to use the flow and what's happening at the moment. So we have this pandemic going on, we've got the world in a crisis, but remember, it's the whole world that is in a crisis. Every country, I don't think there are many countries that are not in an economic crisis. And so we're all kind of in the same boat, as it were. And we've got to find our way out. And the way to do that is to have a look at what is happening right now. What am I good at? What is it that I do that I'm good at, that can serve other people, can help to improve their lives, a way that I can use to generate an income as well while doing that, while helping other people and serving my community or, my town, my country. What are the things that I can do, the talents and the skills that I've developed that I can use to fit into where things are going right now? An example, and the simplest example, is how many people's businesses have now become an online business. People are conducting their business remotely. People are finding a way to provide essential services. So perhaps that clarifies how you can also bring down the levels of fear you have or uncertainty you have about your future by looking at where things are going right now and how you are going to fit in and make the best of this opportunity. Because really it's a choice. We can either make it work for us or we can make it not work for us. Watched a movie many years ago, and I forget the name of it, but it had Morgan Freeman in it, and I think it was Eddie Murphy in it, and they were in a prison, and Morgan Freeman said, well, you either get busy living or you get busy dying. And I'm sure most of you want to get busy living. So have a look at how things are going, where things are going, and how you can start getting busy living and making a living. All right, that's all from me. I think the next video that I'll do will be a chiropractic tip, so stay tuned for that. If you like the content of this one, press the like button, subscribe, hit the bell notification button, and I look forward to bringing you something new next time I see you. Again, thank you for watching. Stay safe and keep your balance. Up till then, bye-bye.